We were sitting in the law office, the air thick with the scent of old leather and silence that made your throat dry. My son Wade kept shifting in his seat, like a child caught cheating on a test, while his wife Sloane crossed her legs and flicked invisible lint from her designer skirt. I still wore my black funeral dress. I hadn't even had time to grieve properly. The lawyer, Mr. Kent, began reading Levy's will with that practiced monotone that made every word feel like it weighed 10 pounds. To my beloved wife, Mildred, I leave the ranch property on Millstone Ridge. Before he could continue, Sloane let out a dramatic sigh. Oh, for heaven's sake, she muttered. Just take that rundown place and go live out your golden years pretending to be a pioneer. Wade said nothing. Not a word in my defense. This was the boy I raised with late-night lullabies and hand-me-downs sewn from scratch. Now he sat there, hands folded, silent. The rest of Leva's estate, our home, the bank accounts, the investments, was divided cleanly between Wade and Sloane. When it ended, Sloane stood and looked at me with a smirk I'll never forget. I guess that settles it, she said sweetly. Take your little ranch and go live out there alone. Maybe the isolation will help you reflect on where you failed as a mother. I didn't argue. I didn't cry. I just said, understood, and walked out with my purse clutched tight against my ribs. They thought they were sending me away with nothing, but 1 week later, I would discover something in the basement of that so-called worthless ranch that would make my phone ring 62 times. Not that I planned on answering. The ride home from that law office was silent, except for the hum of the tires against the pavement and the quiet war in my chest. Grief and betrayal don't scream. They whisper in your ribs, settle behind your eyes, and make everything look unfamiliar. Wade didn't offer to walk me to the car. He didn't even look up as I passed him. Sloane waved me off like I was a waiter she no longer needed. I kept hearing her voice replay in my head, maybe the isolation will help you reflect on where you failed as a mother. Like she was doing me a favor. 40 years. That's how long I stood by my family. Through layoffs, surgeries, unpaid bills, and forgotten birthdays. I was the glue, the one who made sure there were Christmas gifts even when we couldn't afford them. The one who worked double shifts at the diner so Wade could get braces and a halfway decent shot at college. But now I was a burden with a ranch. When I got home, I walked through the front door for what I knew would be the last time. The house still smelled like Levy's cologne, sandalwood, and coffee, and the sound of his last breath still lingered in the corners of our bedroom. I didn't belong here anymore, not in their eyes. I packed alone. No one offered to help, no calls from Wade, no visit from the grandchildren. Sloane had made it very clear that I was not welcome in their version of the future. I boxed up memories like they were leftovers. Photos, hand-stitched blankets, the old clock from the kitchen wall. Things nobody else wanted. Sloane had called them clutter. When I pulled out of the driveway, my car filled with boxes and dust, I caught a glimpse of Sloane watching from the upstairs window. She wasn't sad. She wasn't regretful. She looked satisfied. That was the moment I stopped crying. Not because I wasn't hurt, but because I understood something new. They hadn't just written me out of the will. They'd written me out of the story. But what they didn't know was that sometimes the ending you're handed isn't the one you keep. Sometimes it's just the beginning of something else entirely. The road to Millstone Ridge was nothing but gravel, weeds, and potholes deep enough to swallow a wheel. I hadn't been to the ranch in years. Levi inherited it from his grandfather, but he never wanted much to do with it. Too much work, he used to say. Too many ghosts. Back then, I thought he meant the past. I never imagined he was being literal. The ranch house appeared at the end of the winding path like a tired old friend peeling paint, crooked porch steps, one shutter hanging by a rusted hinge. But it was mine now. Mine, because no one else wanted it. Not out of love or intention, but rejection. I found the key where Levi always kept it, under the third board on the porch. The door creaked open to reveal a house blanketed in dust and silence. Furniture covered in white sheets. Faded curtains. A smell like time itself had settled into the floorboards. It felt like exile. I dropped my bags in the front room and sank into the old armchair near the fireplace. The silence pressed in on me. No voices, no footsteps, no phone buzzing with requests or reminders. Just me, and the sound of my own breath. For the first time in my life, I wasn't anyone's wife, or mother, or unpaid helper. I was just Mildred, and I wasn't sure who that was anymore. Over the next few days, I kept busy. Cleaning, organizing, wiping down windows until my arms ached. I told myself it was for hygiene, but the truth was, I needed to move, to do something. Grief settles into idle hands. In the kitchen, I found a loose board in the pantry. Behind it was a small metal box. Inside were old letters handwritten, yellowed with age, and tied with twine. The name signed at the bottom of each one made my breath catch. Elena. A name I'd never heard before. There were also maps, notes, photographs, and something else that would change everything. But I didn't know that yet. That night, I stood outside on the porch, looking out over the land they had cast me onto. They thought they had buried me. They didn't know I was standing on something powerful. Something they had overlooked for generations. The box I found behind the pantry board wasn't just full of letters. It was full of secrets. Old love letters written in Spanish, dated from the 1940s, delicate but intense, each one from a woman named Elena to a man she called Sam. Sam. That was Levy's grandfather, Samuel Taylor. The letters were full of emotion, yes, but also something else. References to land surveys, mineral veins, and phrases like the copper runs deep. At first I thought I was reading metaphors, but as I sorted through the maps and documents, the words took on a different weight. This wasn't poetry, it was evidence. Elena wrote about the claim, the bureau, and a dream they shared of building a life on what lay hidden beneath the ridge. She talked about secrecy, about keeping the knowledge safe from those who would misuse it. She even mentioned a tunnel. I took the letters to the one person in town who might remember that far back, Ruth Harmon. She was Levy's Sunday school teacher once, and she'd never liked Sloan, which already made me trust her judgment. When I showed her the letters, her eyebrows lifted. "Oh honey," she said, "so you finally found what Sam buried." My heart skipped. "You know about this?" "Everybody used to," she said. "Before the war, Sam was obsessed with mineral claims. Copper, silver, maybe more. Filed all kinds of papers. But after Elena passed, he shut down. Became a recluse. Folks forgot about the mining. Thought it was just a dream he let go of." "But it wasn't," I said. Ruth smiled. "No, dear, he just stopped talking about it." When I got home, I went straight to Levi's grandfather's old desk. I'd cleaned around it, but I hadn't opened the drawers yet. Inside were files, correspondence with the Bureau of Land Management, mineral rights applications, hand-drawn survey maps with annotations in the margins. One folder stood out. It was labeled Assay Reports. I opened it to find geological data charts, numbers, and technical notes that I didn't fully understand. But one phrase was written clearly across the top of a page: economically viable copper reserves present across 73% of Millstone Ridge tract. My hands trembled. The ranch Sloan had mocked, that Wade had dismissed, wasn't just some forgotten relic of a family feud. It was a gold mine, or rather a copper mine. And somewhere beneath the creaky floorboards and sagging roof, the very thing they'd tried to throw away was about to make me more powerful than they'd ever imagined. After Ruth confirmed what the papers hinted at, I knew I couldn't stop. I started going through the entire house drawer by drawer, floorboard by floorboard. What I found in the bedroom closet changed everything. Behind a false back panel, wrapped in oilcloth to protect it from moisture, was a thick manila envelope. Inside were updated geological reports dated from the 1970s all the way to 5 years ago. Not guesses, not rumors, but professional assessments detailed to the decimal point. There were drill samples, soil analysis, a feasibility study. One line stood out in bold, high-grade copper ore, present projected yield, substantial over 20-year period. At the bottom was a letter from a mining company, Southwestern Mining Corporation. The date on it? Just 6 months before Levi died. They were offering a $2 million upfront lease plus quarterly royalties. But Levi had never responded. Not a single note scribbled on the margin. Just the envelope, sealed and untouched, as if he couldn't bear to face it. Then, at the bottom of the folder, I found a handwritten letter, in Levy's careful script. "Mildred deserves better than what I gave her. This is her chance to finally live the life she put aside for Wade and me. Don't let that woman ruin it." That woman. Even in private, he couldn't write Sloan's name, but his meaning was clear. He knew. He knew what she was, and he'd done everything he could to keep this secret from her. I sat on the floor for hours, surrounded by documents worth more than anything I'd ever held. I thought of all the years I'd clipped coupons to buy school supplies, of how we struggled to pay for Levi's medication, of how Wade had asked me more than once to co-sign loans for a house I wasn't welcome in. And now, The ranch they'd used to cast me aside was worth millions. I didn't rush to call the mining company, not yet. First, I poured a glass of water, turned off my phone, and took a long walk across the ridge as the sun set behind the hills. I needed to be sure, not just about the land, but about myself. Was I ready to stop being the woman who gave everything away? By the time I reached the old windmill, the answer was clear. Yes. I was done asking for permission. It was time to take the power I never knew I had and do something with it. The phone calls started before I even made a decision. First it was Wade, his name lighting up my screen like a warning, then Sloan. Then Wade again. I didn't answer. Not because I didn't want to, but because I finally understood something. Silence is powerful when you've been ignored for years. They didn't leave voicemails at first. Just hang-ups. Then came the messages, Sloan asking if I'd settled in okay, Wade wondering if I needed anything from town. Their sudden concern felt like perfume sprayed over rot. And then, the truth. A message from Wade, his voice tight. Hey Mom, we've run into a bit of a financial hiccup. Property taxes went up and Sloan wants to remodel the kitchen. We were wondering if you might be able to help us out. Just short term. Maybe 50,000? 50,000. Like it was pocket change. Like it wasn't nearly twice what I made in a year waiting tables back when I was raising him alone. I didn't reply. Not until the next morning, when the sun was rising over the hills and the papers were spread across my kitchen table. The lease agreement from Southwestern Mining sat beside a fresh cup of coffee. I picked up the phone and finally returned Wade's call. He answered on the first ring. Mom, thank God. We've been trying to reach you. I know, I said. I've been busy. Look, we might have said things we didn't mean. Sloan was upset. We all were. Losing Dad, it hit us hard. She told me to go play farmer, I said calmly. Told me I failed as a mother. That's not grief, Wade. That's cruelty. He was quiet. She didn't mean it like that. How did she mean it? Another pause. Then, Mom, what do you want me to say? That we were wrong. That we hurt you. Fine, I'm sorry. She's sorry too? But not sorry enough to stop asking for money. His voice got quieter. We're in a tough spot. I let that hang in the air before asking, Wade, are you happy? The question seemed to catch him off guard. What? With her, with how things are. He hesitated. She has high standards. That's one way to put it. Mom, what is this about? I leaned forward, my voice firm. It's about the mining lease. I've signed it. And by this time next month, I'll have more money than your father and I earned in our entire lives. Silence. Then, you're serious? I am. And suddenly his tone changed. He started talking about merging properties, sharing investments, building me an apartment over their garage so I could be close to the grandkids. I smiled, not out of joy, out of clarity. 3 weeks ago you sent me away like garbage. Now that ranch is worth millions, and suddenly you want me close again. Mom, we just want what's best for everyone. No, Wade. You want what's best for yourselves, but I'm not your backup plan anymore. I'm not your silent safety net. If you want a relationship with me, it starts with respect, not need. And with that, I hung up. For the first time, not out of pain but out of power. The contract was signed on a crisp Thursday morning. I wore a navy blue pantsuit I hadn't owned 2 weeks ago, bought on a trip into the city specifically for this meeting. At the law firm of Wells Harmon, I sat across from Patricia Wells, a mineral rights attorney with sharp eyes and a no-nonsense tone. She reviewed every clause of the lease with Southwestern Mining, every royalty schedule, every clause about land use and termination rights. This is a very favorable agreement, Miss Taylor, she said, sliding the final page toward me. You're in a strong position. When I signed my name, I didn't just ink a deal, I closed a chapter. A lifetime of self-sacrifice, of being quiet, of making myself small so others could shine. I left that office a landowner, a businesswoman, and most importantly, my own person. Within 2 weeks, $4 million landed in my account. The quarterly royalties would begin soon after. I hired a financial advisor. I paid off Levi's lingering medical bills. I made a donation to the local women's shelter. And then I drove back to Millstone Ridge with groceries in the back seat, and a peace in my chest I hadn't felt in decades. I renovated the house slowly, with intention. The original beams stayed. The old fireplace remained untouched. But now there were energy-efficient windows, solar panels on the roof, new plumbing, fast internet, and a reading nook that overlooked the ridge. I took a photography class and started documenting the changing seasons. I bought hiking boots. I took day trips into nearby towns. I joined a community geology course just to understand the ground beneath me and what it had always been worth. Wade kept calling. His tone changed, less desperate, more reflective. He told me Sloan had moved out, that the kids missed me, that he was in therapy, learning about boundaries. I didn't rush to respond, but when he called just to tell me that Emma made the honor roll, I called back. Because I wasn't bitter. I wasn't angry. I was free. For the first time in my life, I was living not for someone else but for myself. And in that quiet freedom, I discovered something far more valuable than copper. I discovered me. 6 months later, I sit on my front porch each morning with a cup of strong coffee and the sunrise stretching across the hills of Millstone Ridge. The copper mine hums quietly in the distance, but the real transformation happened above ground right here in me. I'm not the woman who left the lawyer's office in tears. I'm not the mother who waited for scraps of kindness from her own family. I'm Mildred Taylor, landowner, grandmother, survivor, and finally the author of my own story. If you've ever felt discarded, diminished, or overlooked by the people you gave everything to, just know, your story doesn't have to end in silence. Sometimes the greatest revenge is simply living a life you love, on your own terms. If this story resonated with you, leave a comment below and share your experience. And if you know someone who needs to hear this, send it to them. Thank you for listening.